As I wait for my green chair and my green tractor to show up, another shout out to John Deere, our official sponsor of the Truth About Ag podcast. Ever wish all your farm data was in one place so you could eventually find it? That's where John Deere Operations Center comes in. Available online 24/7. Use it to plan work, keep records, and analyze results. That way you can reduce errors and make smarter decisions for next season. Plus, it's free to set up and try out. See why thousands of farmers already trust it on their operations at johndeere.ca/precisionag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag. Welcome back to the Truth About Ag, powered by the Hebert Group of Companies and distributed under the RealAgriculture Media Network. I am your host, Evan Schout, and my co-host, Kristjan Hebert here, and we are taking a deep dive into the 1980s to start this one. I am tired of the questions, so I want you to face some of the negativity and tell people why we are not in the 1980s. So I'm going to give you the stats, and I just want your opinion because everybody's heard my opinion. I've been very vocal on social lately. Give me your opinion. So let's start on profitability. Okay. So the numbers, and these are not inflation adjusted, which is another thing I got nailed for a million times over. I'm looking at the ratios. Okay. So average wheat price, if we inflation adjustment, we're probably half what we were in 1980, to be fair. Okay. Yields on wheat, we're 30, we're up to 58. So we're over double on yield production. Cost of production, somewhere in the range of 150. If you inflation adjustment, it's probably times 3. So we're not far off the same cost of production from an inflation adjustment as we were back then. So tell me why profitability is my biggest concern that we're going back to the 80s right now.
Wow. It's hard for me to tell you why, because I don't believe it. So
let's go.
So I think, a couple personal opinions. One, I mean, we're in commodities are in cycles. There's no question, right? Interest rates, wheat prices, canola prices. But I mean, we could have this same discussion 90 days ago compared to today. So China tariffs go on. Canola's trading at $2.50 a bushel less than it is right now, and basis is 50 cents more too. And doom and gloom, right? Canadian farms are all going bankrupt. Don't get me wrong, the U.S. farm's a little tighter right now, but they're getting poured government money, so I think they'll find a way through a lot of them. So we've talked about this for a long time, is that, I believe agriculture is management of cycles, and that currently all policy and social media has done is increase the volatility on the cycle line. So maybe in the old days, prices of grain only moved, say, 1 standard deviation away from the average line, and inputs maybe only moved like 10% of a standard deviation. Yeah. Now, I mean, on my own trading view, I have 2 standard deviations set up for what I think the range is on any commodity price at any day that it can move within a month. And on inputs, it's probably the same. It's almost 2. It's 1 standard deviation for sure. So the timing, Danny Kleinfelter had the line that he believes the future belongs to those that see the opportunities, before other people, and just have better timing, right? The difference between great business people and good business people that I've met, it's just timing. They have the same ideas. It's who pulled the trigger at the right time. And you don't have a crystal ball, but really, I think there was really good profitability in 25 for farms that pulled the plug on a bunch of marketing early and then didn't do any from, call it, middle of November until middle of February. And now if they do it now on quite a few crops. Same thing even with wheat. There's a significant difference in what I see for, say, December 26 to what I saw, in November 25. But it's timing and volatility. Now, is the risk higher?
Oh, yeah.
From a financial standpoint now than it was in the 80s? Yeah, we're outlaying way more money, right? Like cost of productions are 500, 550, 600, not $150. I can remember still in grade 10, 11, 12, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, Dad talking about $200 of gross revenue was a good year, right? And now that doesn't pay the fertilizer bill. So without a doubt, there is more financial risk. than there was in the 80s. But at the same time, a quarter of land in the 80s was almost being given away for taxes at the time of 20% interest rates. You know, prior to 20% interest rates, quarters in our area were trading for 70 grand. It took till like, Dad has one quarter he always tells me about. I think he bought it in maybe 81, and it took till like 2015 or something for it to get back to what he paid for it, right? So that the equity base right now, I think, is stronger.
I'm going there, just
so
one step at a time.
Yeah. So like,
let me quiz you. Can I play devil's advocate?
Yeah.
Do we have better insurance possibilities right now than we did in the 1980s?
Oh, not even a question.
So we're saying the risk is higher, which I don't disagree. Guys are outlaying way more cash than we've ever done in the past and financing. But we also have products right now that I got farms that are in an agri-stability payment today.
Yeah.
And they will have profit this year, regardless of a crop they grow. Now they've kept their costs under control, which I would argue most haven't. Mm-hmm. But even we look at our farm heaves, we don't have a significant risk if things don't go the right way, because we have the insurance products in place. So does that take away that profitability argument that we're heading to the 80s?
Oh, it puts a 3-year buffer on it.
100% it does.
Right? Like, it takes 3 years basically to wipe out your agri-stability margin or your private reference margins, depending on, I don't care what company you're using, right? They're all using some averages and pro formas. It takes a good 3 years for a good crop insurance contract to go to hell, right? Like, because on their 10-year averages, and even if it's expedited. I mean, yeah, like that. I mean, here's the bottom line. If you have a good gross margin, reference margin, net margin, whatever you call it, you're in a pretty good spot for the next years. If you don't, you're not in a good spot. But that's the question of how the last 7 years beat your margins up so bad that you're at a point of risk that's a problem. That's more than just an 80s versus 2000, 2020.
And did you leave your cost structure where it was over those 7 years, or did you lower it so that when your insurance went to hell, your risk also came down?
Or my absolute favorite, you had a tax problem 3 or 4 years ago when they changed expedited depreciation, and we thought we'd just buy a bunch of new equipment to fix the tax problem. That one I really love talking about now when someone says, I'm going to lose money, but I'm going to have a huge tax bill because I have no CCA pools left and I got no cash because I didn't grow grain. Whoever came up with expedited depreciation needs a punch in the mouth.
You were in Ottawa 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I said it in Ottawa. It's so stupid.
Okay, now I'll pull you to the other side. So let's look at the debt side before we go into the land equity side. So debt side, theoretically, not inflation adjusted again, 17 billion worth of debt in the industry. Today it's 164 billion. But, and there's a but, debt to equity average ratio on farms was 20% in 1980, and it's 20% today. And one more caveat, interest rates were 12.89 in 1980, and the Bank of Canada rate is 2.66 at the end of 25. Mm-hmm. Go.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the best thing. So, I mean, inflation adjusted, but we're looking at ratios, so it doesn't matter. The best thing is the story here I would tell is that a 20% DDE in the 1980s, so we're at 5-1. So let's say the farm had 500,000 equity and 100,000 or 500,000 of debt, 100,000, or 500,000 equity, 100,000 of debt, right?
Yep. So
they had 400 grand of a backstop, and they were probably farming, 500 to 1,000 acres or whatever the number was. Break evens were 150. Well, that same farm now, that we're talking about, there's $4 million, $5 million to $1 million. So it's why you and I don't like the current ratio, right? Because the current ratio, some banks like to look at, and that's just current assets minus current liability. It can be 2-to-1, but if I have $2 in one pocket and I owe you $1, I have a 2-to-1 current ratio. If I have 20 million in one pocket and 10 million in debt, I have a 2-to-1 ratio, but I have $10 million.
It's a per acre. It's a per acre number we need to look at.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's my opinion. I believe right now, because of what's going on in commercial real estate, and because we really only have 5 big banks in Canada that compete, you got FCC in there and you got the credit unions, but the 5 big ones drive a lot of the deal specs.
Yep.
Because commercial real estate looks horrible, and because governments have printed money and Canadians aren't saving money out past 3 years, our long-term rates north of 3 years suck. And it's all because of bank reserves, 100% because of bank reserves and the government bonds they bought. So because of this, we're not seeing very good terms come out on loans, right? And we have extremely wealthy equity wealth farms have debt service issues, as in cash to pay it. And it's not that they're out of cash. It's that I think some of the ratios and deals we're doing. So, I mean, what did Europe do to fix this 25, 30 years ago? They went to a 50-year mortgage on land because land in Europe has beat productive value for way longer, right? They went to other sources of capital being able to back it. So if the Canadian pension fund is willing to accept a 2.5% return, why do we have them put money in T-bills? Why don't we have them be the debt behind some farmland? I don't want them to own land. I like the idea of the farmland board, specifically until I'm 80 or 90, but I really like it right now. But we need more debt options, right, on land, and we could fix this, like, call it small working capital crunch that we're seeing across the industry. But it has nothing to do with an 80s comparison, in my mind.
And the big one for me is people look at the interest rates and say, well, yeah, but it could go there. I mean, there's podcasts out lately that they'll actually do the math. If interest goes by a half, here's how much buying power you lose. And I don't disagree. But I think the part that we need to be cognizant of is majority of our producers, I have locked in 10-year rates. Swaps for us, we locked in at COVID at massively low numbers. And until 2031, 2032, I don't have interest rate risk. So that is a future problem. Don't get me wrong. Let's call it 5-6 years, but we have a runway to plan for it. Where in 1980, the rate shot up so fast and a lot of people were sitting variable. Yeah, it crushed farms. We're no different with us. If we didn't have any fixed debt and the rate went up 10%, oh yeah, we're in trouble. But the fact of the matter is most of our debt is laddered with 10 years, 5 years, swaps for 10 years. And some guys, I mean, FCC's been given 15 years to some guys. I mean, and in the US, I mean, I think it's 25 to 30 year rates you can essentially lock. So in my eyes, we are in a totally different debt mechanism world where guys have actually planned against interest rate risk. 1980, that wasn't possible. In fact, the mechanisms like swaps weren't around.
Yeah. Well, and I think, so number one, if you're worried about interest rates doubling or tripling or quadrupling,
lock it.
I mean, your worry really should have been when interest was at basically 0 to 1% during COVID. What did you do at that point in time to set yourself up for the next 10 years, right? On op money versus machinery money versus land and building money, right? Yeah. What's your plan now? So do you have some 1, 3, 5, 10-year plans on how to help yourself from interest rate risk, right? There's lots of different, let's look at every other industry. There's 100 ways from sideways to come up with these things. The other point is sometimes I think we get in our little farm bubble. Like for 1 second, if we think interest rates are set anything to do with farmland, we are dreaming. Right? It's the joy of, we can get super frustrated when we go to our bank and the same person that does our house mortgage or our boat payment is the same one that sets up a $10 million mortgage on a piece of land. Yep. But at the same time, housing mortgages vote. If interest rates went from where they are to double, I don't know what percent of the country would have to quit paying for their house and move out. A lot. It's astronomical. So any government in charge at that time would lose their job. And so sometimes I think, I'm not saying that history can't teach you good things, but also in today's world, housing starts, job losses, there's such huge statistics for the government. I'm not saying that I enjoy that they print money as much as they do. I just don't believe, we're way more at risk of the money printing to continue, and that really is devaluing our asset base by the amount of money out there than we are by 20% interest rates, I think.
Okay. Number 3. So along with those debt numbers we gave you, equity on farms went from $75 billion, not inflation adjusted, to $833 billion, $1,000 or 1,000% increase. Debt service ratio went from 1.2 to increase to 1.4. So interestingly enough, profitability, we make more cash earnings to pay the debt obligations on the new debt numbers than we did in 1980. We are stronger on profitability and cash earnings compared to debt today than we were in 1980.
Well, not only are you stronger on debt service, those ratios, the numbers you're giving me shows that a whole bunch of debt could be termed out on land equity if it needed to be fixed.
Because we're 20% debt to equity.
On a ton of farms, right? You'd push that to 60 pretty easy. I mean, if Clip was here, he'd say if you took all that money from 1980 till now and put it in the stock market, you'd be just as rich.
But you wouldn't have.
And I mean, that's my issue. I don't know anybody that'll lever themselves the way we will for land opportunities to borrow against our house and our land to go put more money in the stock market. Like, very few people on earth do that, and you're not guaranteed the dividend on it either, depending on how it works. So, yeah, like I said, I don't get me wrong. I understand a bunch of pro formas in North America look god awful headed into 26.
Yep.
Right. And I hope it encourages a lot of people to spend a lot of time on their income statement and figuring out where they can control costs and reduce costs, but still maximize gross margin. Right. So I don't want you cutting nitrogen to fix it. I want you to look hard at repairs. I want you to look hard at productivity. I want you to look hard at small tools. I want you to look hard at interest, right? Do you have too much variable? Have you fixed any? Has there been any opportunities? I want you to look at quoting 2 or 3 places on your chemicals or on your John Deere parts, and insurance. What's the variance? Insurance, right? Like, I think there's lots of strategies out there to knock $25-$50 off your cost of production to make you feel better.
Well, and the best part, I was at Lethbridge the other day, and I said this whole room is over equipped, and I think I pissed off half the room. So we'll take it as a little sharp arrow there.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but I mean, it's the fine line discussion, everybody. And, we understand that each area has a different multiple, but at the same time, I don't know a single farmer that couldn't expand a minimum of 10% on their current equipment. But the big problem is a lot of them, it's 50%. And so your productivity number really kills your income statement.
Okay. Now we're going to go back to the consolidation talk, because I got those numbers in here too. So the average capital on farms has gone from 409,000, not inflation adjusted, to 4.5 million. Okay. The top 2% of top 2% of farm revenue went from 250,000 to 5 million. Okay. And the last one, the farms that make less than 100K went from 89% of farms to 50% of farms. So we are considerably more consolidated today, obviously. And that ties back to your conversation on knowing your numbers. Is that what's driving some of these larger scale farms to have to take the business practices to de-risk themselves?
Well, I mean, this conversation is always one I like to throw the inflation adjusted back into the economist's face.
Yep.
So they say that, inflation is forcing farm consolidation. And I say, well, can I pay you what I paid you in 1981? Yeah. Right. So what was average wage in 1981? I don't know, but
I have no idea.
$6 was probably minimum wage. It's 15 or something now federally, maybe more than that. So, I mean, wages are one of the number one drivers to productivity on what you get out, and one of the biggest expenses for businesses. And so, I completely agree. People are your biggest asset, but consolidation is partially just a fact of people and technology, right? Like, my grandpa in 1981, was using a pretty crappy old tractor, right? And a small drill, and didn't have zero till the late 80s. And now we got, 90-foot drills that can almost drive themselves, and we can variable rate every acre. So, like, people and technology is what's driving consolidation, because it's just capital utilization, right? We want to pretend that farms are different, but it's no different than a Subway. It's no different than Brandt or Cat, or like, you have 3 things to drive your business: time, brains, and money, right? So how are your people going to work with their time? How are you going to work with your time? What brains is just around technology and processes and productivity and utilization, and money is capital utilization and operating money. Like, and those are the 3 levers. I don't care what business you're in.
Well, and I think the other thing, consolidation, which maybe I didn't even realize was being pushed, was I've met a lot of farmers across Canada now that they're diversifying outside of acres because they can't. I mean, acres just don't make sense for some guys right now. And I'm getting asked the question, should we just concentrate on efficiency because we can't expand on acres? And yes, but then they have the discussion of, can we value add? Can we buy other businesses that are, vertical or horizontal integration to ours? Those discussions didn't happen back then. So I think there's a de-risking factor there, as well as the majority of the acres are actually looking at other businesses. Maybe not the majority of farms, because we argue the census data all the time.
Yeah.
But there's 16,000 farms over $1 million out of the 189,000. I would argue those 16 are looking for other ways not just acres necessarily for revenue.
Well, the thing is, for that group of people, I mean, a lot of those farms, trucking companies are bigger than trucking companies were in 1980.
Yep.
Right? Like when you and I were growing up, a big trucking company locally was a guy that had 2 to 3 trucks. And now we know farms with 10, 15, 20. Right? So I think even the farms that don't think they're looking at other businesses, they have them if you're looking at anything deemed in 1980 terms. Right? Like you have your own trucking company. You have a real estate company. You own land. You have an infrastructure company, that your bins, etc. Right? You have your farm company that grows commodities and sells them. You have a marketing company. I mean, you're buying and selling millions of dollars of inputs and commodities. Right? So it's turned into a multifaceted business that has lots of opportunities for horizontal and vertical integration without even trying to dip your toe in something that has nothing to do with what you're doing. Right? I find that quite dangerous because most people don't understand other businesses, but I mean, anything to do with your farm that you're already doing a little bit of, magically, you're going to really care when you go to figure it out. And we've seen some people do some really cool stuff.
Well, let's be fair. We got 3 CPAs on staff, so we run a consulting business. That is not like that was our unique ability. It wasn't cattle. It wasn't supply managed. We decided to diversify into the consulting side.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it fits in our realm. We want to be good at our own numbers. We want to learn from people. We want benchmarks. And so our vertical integration or horizontal integration works pretty well with that.
Okay, last thing before we jump on with our guest. So you sent me a LinkedIn the other day. Mike Downey, I'll give you a shout out in the States. He does some succession. I think he works with Uncommon Farms a little bit, but he put out a post, and we rag on the census data from Saskatchewan and Canada quite a bit. So let's rag on the US stuff. So 1.8 million total farms in the US, down 127,000 from 2020. 2.5 million fewer acres. I'm assuming that's urban sprawl. I'm guessing, and that one scared me a bit. 78% of farms generate less than 100K, with 48% under 10K. 3.9% of the farms make over $1 million and operate about 36% of all farmland. So their data is not much different than ours, to be fair, based on percentages. But to be honest, we actually, 2% of our farms own close to 50% of the acres. So we are considerably more consolidated than they are, which makes sense. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think part of the reason we're more consolidated is our revenue per acre is quite a bit less based on corn, soybean country.
Yep.
I mean, I like the post. I like the part of his post where he says, if your farm is approaching or exceeding 1 million in revenue, just let you know you're statistically rare. You're not average. You're not typical. You shouldn't plan like the majority. Yep. I mean, that follows exactly what we're saying, right? You know, it's why I struggle with StatsCan. I mean, if a farm has $10,000 in revenue, like I have good friends with hobbies. You know, I got a good buddy that makes way more money than that playing blackjack, and so, but he's still an engineer. I don't call him a blackjack player for a career. So I just
that comment's gonna get us nailed.
You know, I just struggle because these stats make running a grower group or being a politician that has to deal with agriculture an absolute disaster.
Yep.
Because we live in a democracy, and because of the way we've set the rules of the game, we have people that aren't even playing the game full-time or even part-time, wanting and discussing the majority of the changes we want. And yet we have a minority, less than 10%, that are driving 60, 70, 80% of GDP. So all the G7 countries are saying we have a productivity crisis. Canada's almost the worst. We need to fix productivity. And so more than ever, the voice of these, you know, $1 million farms and bigger, and the voice of the farms that are trying to get to 1 million. Like if you truly are at 500 or 50 and you're working your way to 1 million, awesome. We're here to help, right? Like our definition of my favorite client is any farm that wants to help themselves, yep. Right? And wants it to be their business. So, but that's who we're trying to make good policy for. And yet that's only 10% of the voice. And so
it's the quietest percent of the voice.
Yeah, it's the quietest percent. So it's just, you know, I sometimes harp on grower groups and politicians, but at the same time, it's like they have a white noise machine going on in their goddamn office every day with 10,000 ideas, and 170,000 of them are coming from people that they're not ever going to help. Yep. Yeah, I'll get shit on for that, but
It's fine. Okay. That's what I needed this morning, Hebe. So let's move on. We got Mike Frank from UPL sitting down with us to talk about, honestly, his history up to the CEO role, and then honestly where the input side is moving. So that's the Truth About Ag. Before we get to our guest here on the Truth About Ag, another quick shout out for John Deere. Ever wish all your farm data was in one place? That's John Deere Operations Center. Plan work, keep records, analyze results, all online. Free to set up. See why thousands of farmers trust it at johndeere.ca/precisionag. Well, Heaves, it seems like we continue this CEOs from Saskatchewan, let's call it what we continually keep bringing on here. So I got another one for us today, and this one's a bit of a treat. So Mike started a career as a sales rep in Saskatchewan. Give us the background, because that's where we usually like to start with the CEOs.
Yeah, great. Good to see you, Evan and Kristjan. Happy to do that. Yeah, I grew up on a farm. It was a mixed farm, but mostly grain in near Southie, just south to Southie, Saskatchewan, just right on the Qu'Appelle Valley, really. And studied engineering at the University of Saskatchewan. But I always wanted to farm, so I went back to the farm when I graduated, and also took a job as a sales rep for Monsanto way back in the day. And I thought I would do that for a few years and ultimately just become a full-time farmer. But I loved doing both, but including the Monsanto experience. And so I ended up pursuing that side of the agricultural career. So I spent over 25 years at Monsanto, probably 7 or 8 in Canada, and then the rest of them mostly in the U.S., out of St. Louis, Missouri. Spent a few years in China with Monsanto at the time. And then eventually I left Monsanto back in 2017 and spent about 4 years at Nutrien, running the retail side of the Nutrien business from a global perspective. And then just over 4 years ago, joined UPL. And I'm the CEO at UPL, which is a global crop protection company. And that's what I'm doing today, living in London. And I should say, because from a Canadian perspective, most of the people will think it's London, Ontario, but it's London in the UK.
I was going to say, just down the road, I think I'm in Listowel today. So I do love the fact I was going to spend a few years at Monsanto and go back farming, and then 25 years later.
Yeah, right? It did work out that way.
So, Mike, I'm sure I've asked you this before. Is Daryl Frank a cousin, or?
Daryl's my first cousin. In fact, he's living on the farm where I grew up, and of course, farming that land. Ooh. So yeah, okay. He's my younger first cousin, almost like a younger brother to me. I stay close to Daryl. We talk all the time, and we're always texting back and forth, and so, yeah, he's doing a great job farming in that area.
So Daryl, Daryl would be pretty close to my age, because my wife and I have done some stuff with him and his wife in agriculture stuff. And I think our kids are honestly even within like 1 year of each other.
Okay.
And Daryl and I are both blessed with wives that really like horses.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, Kelly's a horse lover for sure.
Yeah.
I love how you said blessed.
Each other someday.
I like that you said blessed. I like that he said blessed.
Hey, my wife listens to the podcast too.
Oh,
yeah, that's good. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never heard you say that before, so this is new.
Yeah. So I guess let's. There's a whole bunch of questions I could ask, but let's go to the Nutrien. The time you were at Nutrien, just because Ken's been a guest too, so I'm assuming Ken would have come there. Did he come from Canpotex to Nutrien right around when you did?
He did. We joined at a similar time. He came just a little bit after me, but yeah, okay. I know Ken very well. Great guy, doing a fantastic job leading that business right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it would have been around the same time. So one of the first times I met you was in Regina, and we were having a really good discussion. And I wanted to pull on this thread early in the podcast because it's something we get asked lots. But we had a great discussion that day on kind of different countries in the world and the mix of chemicals that get used on farm between patent and off patent, and how the countries have different regulations. And I just remember having a great chat about it that day. So do you think you could give us a rundown of UPL's business in some of the countries our listeners would know? So Canada, US, I think Brazil's one that everyone needs to
to pay attention to, and then the rest of the world. But those are the three that we talk about the most in Canada. And then also kind of how you see that patent off patent mix depending on which country you're in, because I've found it significantly different.
Yeah. No, great question. So maybe let me start, Kristjan, just by talking a little bit about UPL. So
Yeah.
UPL is a company that started back in the 1960s. We were founded in India, and we're a manufacturing company. So we're the number 5 largest crop protection company in the world. And what makes us unique today, this wasn't unique 20 years ago, but today we still manufacture ourselves over 70% of what we sell, like as a basic manufacturer. Whereas a lot of the companies today are using third-party manufacturing for most or a lot of their supply. We still do our own manufacturing, which for us, that helps us kind of, we think, control our destiny because we control the manufacturing side. You know, the industry, of course, globally has changed a lot over the last 20, 25 years. Back in the year 2000, about 70% of the global crop protection products sold were on patent. And today that's now less than 20%. So the industry's changed a ton. Now, we do business in 140 countries. You know, in some countries we have the number 1 market share place. And in countries like Canada, we have actually quite low market share, in the mid single digits, really. So I would say there's some markets where farmers are still primarily using the products from the original manufacturer, even if they're off patent. And then in other countries, it's more diversified than that. And so, like you take Mexico as an example, we have nearly 20% market share, in a very sophisticated ag market like Mexico as well, where farmers, are planting, grains, but also, horticulture and fruit and veggie crops as well. So, yeah, it does vary a lot. I think a lot of it comes down to, there's competition in every market, but a lot of it comes down to the distribution channel. And the products that the distributors and the retailers are putting on their shelf, and ultimately promoting to their grower customers.
Yeah, that's what I see too. And I spent some time, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago in Brussels, and we had a large group of farms from kind of all over the world, all super progressive. And the guys from Brazil, and then a couple farms from India. There was a lady from Zimbabwe. It was super interesting talking about the different mix and the companies they knew, but really, if you got back to the basic ingredients, they were the same chemicals, right? And then it was just a formulation discussion, which is always an interesting one to have in today's world. But I just got back from Ottawa, and it's a general theme that Canadian regulators don't make it easy for anything slightly different than normal to come to Canada too. So I think obviously that's part of the issue, but it'd be interesting to know, like with all the countries you guys deal with, what do you find when it comes to dealing with PMRA, et cetera, to bring a slightly different product into Canada?
Yeah. So look, as I was saying, from a PMRA standpoint, we have no issues working with PMRA. They're one of the most respected regulators in the world. And so in terms of getting our products registered in Canada, that's never been a problem for us. For us, it's more about getting market reach, getting the channel to support us and our products. But again, that's on us. There is, I would say, a difference from a regulatory standpoint. Like if you compare Canada versus Brazil, for biologicals, Brazil has a fast track. So we can get a new biostimulant or even a biocontrol product registered in 6 to 12 months in Brazil, which is why the market for biostimulants is really growing, super fast in Brazil, and it's much slower in Canada. So, yeah, from a traditional crop protection standpoint, for us, it's not really about the regulator. It's just more about getting breaking through with traditional distribution.
Right. Yeah. We were having some conversations on. There was a couple new startups that were using mRNA and tie that into a bunch of the stuff they can do with CRISPR, and like they were turning genes on and off on a potato bug. Is it the Colorado potato bug, so that its digestive system wouldn't affect butterflies at all. And I forget how long they've been fighting, like 5 years. And it's like, God, this seems like it would make a lot of sense. But it was kind of down the same stream as you, as on the traditional one. They were good, but they just need to have theories or reciprocity agreements with countries that we trust the science in to speed up some of the newer biological mRNA, those types of things.
Agree.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And again, depending on if, obviously, when you're in Brussels talking to a European farmer, you should feel good coming from Canada because you still have access to tools where, day by day, their farmers there are losing access to good tools because the regulators aren't taking a risk-based approach. They're just saying, look, what's the profile, and they're banning products.
And it's no different than if I have a good chat with one of my Brazil friends and I want to complain about our railways and ports.
Right, exactly.
Right? It all depends on if you're talking to someone in Brazil, our infrastructure is a huge competitive advantage. If you talk to if you want to compare it to what it could be, obviously there's some opportunity cost there still.
Yeah, I agree. Look, one of the things I've seen as I've traveled around the world, farming is hard everywhere, but the difference is, some countries have other advantages versus other ones. So, whether you have a safety net or no safety net, like you said, infrastructure is a big deal. Access to technology is a big deal. So yeah, there is big differences kind of region to region and country to country.
That's the interesting part, right? In the time when we built the private crop insurance company, so I think it's about 12 or 13 years now, where Australia and New Zealand just ripped the Band-Aid right off. Zero government support for risk management. And what would that do to farming in Canada? I remember when we ran the study on it, like for 4 or 5 years, it stymied growth hard because it was all equity based, right? And the young lady from Zimbabwe, her biggest worry was having security or help to get to her farm. Like it was just a safety thing in parts of Africa to make sure they could get out there. And then she showed me a picture of her bin, and like it was what I'd call weaved together willows that they put the corn in.
Right.
Yeah. Like so we sometimes you got to remember how good there's a lot of things we have really great in Canada that we shouldn't complain about, even though we want it to be better.
Look, it's good to want it to be better, and you guys are doing a good job advocating for that. But you're right. When you travel the world, you come back and you count your blessings.
Yeah. So if you were to kind of go through all your meetings, and your travels around the world in the last year or two, what are the things you find the most exciting coming down the pipe in agriculture that we're going to see, or you think we'll see in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, 2 to 5 years is coming quick. And so, based on my experience, if it's 2 to 5 years, it's technology that's already been invented. It's likely being tested in the fields. Look, I do think there's breakthroughs coming through in this biological space, not just biostimulants, which is they've been around for a while, but more and more biocontrol products. Now, what I've seen with a lot of the biocontrol products, a few things. One is the efficacy typically isn't good enough to be a standalone product, but the cost is also lower on average on a per acre basis. So what's happening in Brazil, as an example, there's a lot of biological control products being thrown in the tank from a resistance management standpoint. So, you can put something in the tank for $3 to $5 an acre, get another mode of action. And from a resistance management standpoint, especially if you have high, infestation of insects or disease, this is where these products are, I think, getting a foothold. So
I heard about a few of those this trip too. There were some science-based people there that it's crazy, some of the stuff that's out there and being tested, right? And hopefully it can get to commercialization for a lot of us. Actually, that was one of the big themes in Ottawa was the money in call it ag tech or whatever area you want to call it, for the commercialization stage. There's not bad money at the startup stage and to get it going, right? But I think, if I remember correctly, don't you guys actually have what do you call it? Open ag. It's open that kind of goes down that thread.
Yeah, we do. So, which is super interesting. So when you think about innovation, like where is innovation going to come from?
Yeah.
Traditionally it's come from companies in this industry that have R&D programs. That's, where it's come from really for the last 25, 30 years. A lot of the technologies actually come from Japanese companies, probably more than most farmers realize has been innovation out of Japan, which companies there and institutions don't have global networks, and so often they end up licensing them to products or to companies that you would be familiar with. But if you look at the kind of the venture capital side, so kind of the startup ag tech community, like there's anywhere from, in the last 3 years, each year, $15 to $16 billion of money going into the ag tech space, which includes food tech. But that's a lot of investment. And And so what we've done as a company is we've set up our research network, not just doing our own research ourselves. So we've really been working with these ag tech startup companies, helping them assess their technology, looking for the path from a global regulatory standpoint. How can we take these products and into which countries, and then ultimately being their commercial arm. So this is a big part of our new product pipeline technology, is taking these technologies to farmers around the world. So we're incredibly excited about that, and it's a really rich network of tools and technologies that we're accessing.
So, yeah, I thought it was interesting when I was reading about it, and I even this week I met a young lady that. So obviously there was a big announcement this week that FCC had kind of crowded in $7 billion of capital, and so the discussion is with a bunch of tech startups and finance people, where would you put it? And I had never heard someone say it, but this one scientist said, like, we need more biofermentation capacity in Canada. There's only one lab out in Nova Scotia that you can do this work. And then she went down the biological, mRNA, all that stuff. And then the second person said, there's, what is there, AI, and there's AISC, which is AI with a science mode. So for instance, when they were doing the vaccines, how fast you can do tests with robots and AI. And as a farmer, I mean, I hadn't even thought of a biofermentation lab being one of the most important things needed for ag tech in our country in the future. Yep. And then, so your guys' concept really kind of caught my eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and how do we get that tangible for an ROI for the average farm? Like, I mean, you guys are talking above my head most of this right now. So, yeah. So give me the actual ROI that we'd be looking at from the sales pitch, right?
Yeah. So that's a great point, Evan, because I think, a lot of the biologicals in the past have been sold, based on driving yield. And we all know that some of those products, they work sometimes, depending on the conditions, the soil, the weather, and sometimes they don't bring much value. And so I do think, from a biostimulant standpoint, those technologies have their own profile, and they need to be positioned properly so the farmer understands, okay, under what kind of stress conditions will this product bring me value? And if there's no stress, there may not be a lot of value that comes in that year. But, so depending on how you want to manage your risk, it could be a good investment. Depends on what other kind of risk mitigation tools that you're operating with. Again, from a biocontrol standpoint, what I'm seeing is that a lot of that is around just managing resistance. So there's kind of two use cases. And Evan, this may or may not make sense in Western Canada. It may, in some cases, in Eastern Canada. But, so one use case is if you have really high population of insects or disease, and you're using multiple modes of action, throwing in a low-cost biocontrol product into the tank, just giving one mode of action to help preserve your traditional products, that can make a ton of sense. And so that's I think where the ROI is. Yep. Another use case would be, like, for example, when I visit with apple growers in Poland, we have a program where the apple grower in Poland is wanting to sell their apples to the French supermarkets with no chemical residue on them, like traditional chemical residue. And so what we do with them is, in the early part of the growing season, we can supply them with traditional crop protection products to control their insects and disease. And then kind of halfway through the growing cycle, we change to a completely biological control product, both for the diseases and for the insects. And by the time they harvest, there's no chemical residue from the initial pesticides left on those apples, so that they can then get a 25% premium when they sell them into the supermarket in France. Now, so how do you take that to an ROI, on a wheat grower in Western Canada? There may not be one, but for an apple grower in Ontario, maybe there could be one if they're going to a high value market.
Well, I think, Ev, like, some of the stuff we talked about was in Ottawa this week was, like, to make sure that all the money that's being spent on health and AI and defense, that we always try and think of how that ties back to agriculture. So, I mean, like, you got to remember that the Hebert process, some of those ideas may or may not have come out of one of the world wars. We were trying to do something kind of similar, and fertilizer was an offshoot. Well, what are in today, when we're doing so much work in, mRNA, DNA, gene sequencing, CRISPR, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Like I said, this one with the Colorado potato beetle, it's a biological they spray on the crop. When the beetle eats it, it specifically stops the beetle's digestive system. Yeah. Doesn't hurt anything else in the whole system. So if you think about that, it's pretty amazing what it could do to all the bug, birth armyworms, cutworms, all the stuff we have to deal with out in Western Canada even. But they're not looking usually to find stuff like that for agriculture. It's usually that it's something they found in the world of defense or something they found in the world of health, right? And then AI was able to do multiple testing. So it's to make sure that, I think our job is to make sure that food and agriculture are still top of mind in all those other industries and how we can cross supply.
Yeah, agree, Kristjan. And look, what's happening is, like this case of RNAi, I mean, a lot of smart scientists are coming out of universities and setting up programs, and now they're getting funding. And so, like, again, there's about $16 billion a year going into ag tech startup funding. Yeah. And some of that is stuff like CRISPR and RNAi, and then, as you said, the regulators need to catch up so that they can then assess it and understand it. But ultimately, the future is much more, I think, direct and specific control products that are better on the environment. But there's still work to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think the exciting part for us is we have a pretty big opportunity in Canada. I mean, I think our biggest competitor in the world is Russia when it comes to what we produce, right? Right from potash to wheat to pretty much everything we do in a critical mineral and agriculture standpoint. And obviously they have a few issues to be able to capture their opportunity right at this moment. I think there's a lot of money when it comes to innovation and specifically if you want to use the word mRNA that doesn't find the U.S. really friendly right now, right? And I think that it's something that in Canada we need to capture that right now. Like it's a pretty important time, I think in food and agriculture history in Canada, and whether we can import all these great ideas and talent, right? Scientists and et cetera that want to work on this, and that we can find more and more markets to export than obviously what the world wants.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, like this, our whole industry, whether it's the farmer or the input companies, I mean, it's under stress right now. And so just like on your operations, you're really making decisions on, where do you invest capital and where do you put the next dollar? Right now, we're putting it in Canada. So Canada is one of a few countries where we're increasing our R&D investment, we're increasing our manufacturing investment, and we're putting more boots on the ground. So we're actually super excited about some of the new technologies and the orientation of the Canadian farmer, and most of this is in Western Canada for us, where farmers want new technology, and so it's super dynamic and exciting for us in this part of the world right now.
So Heb, since you opened up the U.S. and obviously geopolitical, what are tariffs and I mean all the stuff that we're dealing with on the farm gate? How is that affecting your business? And I mean what you're able to do coming into Canada, and obviously you're over in London right now.
Yeah. I would say it's affecting it in two ways. First and foremost, it's with farmers, that have traditionally exported products to the U.S. So it could be a coffee grower in Colombia, or it could be a veggie grower in Mexico. Their margins have been squeezed, and so they're under more stress because of that, and that has a ripple impact across the industry, including in our business. Now, from a direct standpoint, so that's kind of an indirect impact, but we're seeing it and feeling it. Directly, because we produce most of our active ingredient in India and send that to the U.S. Up until a few weeks ago, the tariff from India to the U.S. was 50%. And so, literally what we were doing is, we were storing inventory because it's not quite use season yet. We were storing it in, kind of duty-free warehouses, not clearing it from customs in hope that the tariffs would change. And they have changed a little bit, so they're going down to 18%, but it's still a big bill. And ultimately, unfortunately, as you guys know, if the whole supply chain takes on extra cost, eventually that finds its way to the farmer. So in the short term, we've made the decision that we're going to be the shock absorber for those costs for the most part, but that's also not sustainable. It's kind of like if you guys have a bad year, you can get through one or two of those, but ultimately it's not sustainable. And so, we're the geopolitical impact is impacting agriculture and the whole supply chain from the farmer to the input suppliers.
It's I don't think in my life I thought I'd see a Twitter account be able to have as much effect as it can on market pricing and currency. We could leave it at that.
But it is. But it is.
Yeah, we could leave it at that. But
I think you mean a truth account, but I get your point.
yes, exactly. Yeah, it gets reposted, right? Yeah. What do you think for both corporate agriculture and for production agriculture is what one of the truths or the what do we need to share with the consumer the most as an industry to make sure we can still keep doing what we do? Because I mean I believe that specifically where we are in Western Canada, and it's just because I don't travel as much as you, is that we grow some of the most sustainable food in the whole world. But that obviously with social media, that always doesn't come across either. So what do you think are some of the best stories we need to continue to tell?
Yeah, look, it's a challenge. In most developed countries, like in Canada, US, less than 2% of the people are involved in primary agriculture. And most people are 3 to 5 generations removed from agriculture. And yet everyone has an opinion on it, especially on food, which is fine. They should have an opinion. But I think often people mistake that, when they talk to a farmer or know a farmer or see a farmer on social media. I mean, farmers love what they do and they're passionate about what they do. And I think they misread that and don't understand the risks that farmers take, whether it's a big farm or a small farm. And the risks, whether it be weather risk, market risk, geopolitical risk, it's significant. And so I'm a big believer that, farmers do need a safety net, a market-based safety net, so that they're still incentivized to make really good decisions agronomically and economically and help feed the planet, because global food security still is an issue. But at the same time, because we see it in markets where there's no safety nets, you get a weather event and it's a disaster for the growers. And so, yeah, that's how I think about it.
It was very interesting when we were doing the private insurance, actually. So if I went back, even where there is a safety net in Canada, you go back to, say, the 2004 frost.
Yeah.
And farms actually lost more money in the 4 years after the frost than the year of the frost. And the reason I say that is what we did is, like 2004 were some pretty good years in a lot of Western Canada. So we kind of took their cost of production and their marketing number and come up with the average gross margin percent, right? Then they get hit with the frost. And even though there is a safety net, the next 3 to 4 years, they spent a little less. They forward contracted a little bit less. And it like the opportunity cost over those 4 years actually added up to be a bigger loss than the frost. And that was in an area that has a safety net. Now, do we obviously, Evan and I specifically feel that there could be some pretty good changes to it. But you think of that, say, in Australia, where at times has had zero safety net at all. It's just human nature. When you get punched in the face that hard, not many people can just bounce back to going right back to sound economical and agronomic decisions if you just lost a big chunk of equity.
Yep. No, exactly. Yeah, and consistency in policy, like good policy, then consistency is so important.
Yeah.
It's behavior economics, right? Like it's pretty much as straightforward as you can get. So, being that we know farmers and we know the behavior economics behind it, how does a company like UPL, how do you get the trust from the grower side? Like we talked about ROI, but how do you even get the trust side for them to actually continue down this route, right?
Yeah. Well, look, it starts with, you have to have good products and you have to have support for those products. And so, yeah, we pride ourselves. We focus a lot on product quality. We believe that we're one of the best formulators in the world, where we invest a lot of time and money and technology in formulations, because if you can get a good formulation, like a lot of our technology today is mixing 2 or more active ingredients, often 3, and sometimes now even 4, in a jug where it would be hard to do a tank mix. If you can do the tank mix, there's not a lot of value add by just putting 2 things in a jug. But where you can't do a tank mix on its own, if we can find a formulation where we can stabilize it and give the grower a really good resistance management tool with good efficacy, that's really where we're focused. Today, about 40% of our business is in this space of either biological or value-added, what we call differentiated business. And so So 60% of our business is still kind of what we would call post-patent, or what you're saying is generic product. Yep. But even in the next few years, like our mix is going to move closer to 50-50. And by the end of this decade, will likely be 60-40 the other way, where, only 40% of our business is going to be true post-patent, and 60% is going to be these unique mixtures and biological products, which are growing in a disproportionate way in our portfolio.
Because you could, like, once a active comes off of patent. So, for instance, as farmers, we like to talk the actual chemical name of each company. But once those come off post patent, like, it gets super interesting to be like, if your favorite, wild oat chemical was from one company and your favorite broadleaf's from another one, it gets super interesting on the formulation side. Because I'm a big believer that some of the highest innovation in the next decade is actually in formulation and efficacy. Right, because a lot of that, when you get something on patent, they focus on just keeping that one active by itself, so that money can be extracted. There's a lot of research, but now all of a sudden, as a farmer, the way we need to look at it is, what companies can I partner with to tell them this and this are my two favorite actives? They do exactly what I want when I want it to do, and like you said, Mike, if those can all go into one jug, or even better, 320 or 60, 640 or 1,280 acre totes to do exactly what we want in our area, and the efficacy goes up like that. There's way more to formulation than I think most of us in production agriculture understand.
Yep, agreed. And then you overlay that with new technology like See and Spray technology. So what kind of formulations are going to work better if you got See and Spray and you're not, going broadcast, or even drones like today? I know drones are still not a very big part of the Western Canadian, applicator scene, but in smallholder agriculture, drones have really taken over, which makes sense because small fields, they don't have big equipment. But even in Brazil, like even on large farms, I mean, as you probably know, the drones are no longer the drones that we think of from 5-10 years ago. These are small helicopters that are going out with technology. They can auto refill. You can go 24 hours a day. So, I mean, I was in Brazil seeing, drones that were spraying over 700 hectares a day with very little supervision. So, yeah. So, and again, so if you're spraying with a drone, there's probably a way that we're looking at how can we optimize the formulation, which is different than if you're putting it in with 5 or 10 gallons of water.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the water part. And then, I think too that talking to some buddies in Brazil, I mean, it's a different philosophy some days too, right? Because the humidex and the temperature can get so hot for such a portion of the day. They're trying to optimize evening and nighttime spraying, right? And the changes in, like, I always find it, even just seeding 24 hours, how much a day can change you. And then they're fighting with that so much more than we are in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
totally.
And to be open, Hebes, I got more farms analyzing what spray tires do to field than I've ever had in the past. Most guys just threw out a number, and now I got guys who are actually tracking those numbers to figure out what a drone or what See and Spray, or the ROI on the actual technology side is actually getting stronger from the producer level.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's our job as producers too, with these new technologies, to look for the ways they are applicable, right? So we'll get lots of comments on wheat specifically, and cereal crops in Canada, because there's such a high plant population per square foot that See and Spray, it's going to be really tough to work there. You want to okay, so I'll agree on wheat or barley or oats, but I mean we did some work with See and Spray on desiccation, because in Saskatchewan, where we might have 70 feet of elevation, you got sand in a corner, you got good black dirt in another corner. When you go out to desiccate, sure, some of it is for weed control. But where the area of the field where it's completely dried out, the weed control is not that good either, because the weeds aren't uptaking it. We were using See and Spray at different rates on our pre-harvest application, right? So I think there's a whole bunch of application uses for each of these technologies. I mean, I'm not a big drone spray believer yet in Canada, but guess what? We're partnered with a company that we drone all our fields to map out all the rocks. Yeah. Because I don't like having to send my rock pickers up and down the field every 80 feet and have them finish 2 weeks after seeding. So now it's turned rock picking, almost into a video game.
Yeah.
So I think it's to keep our eyes open of
that's his sales pitch to find more rock pickers.
Yeah,
exactly. By the way, Mike, just so you know.
It's always been the worst job on the farm. Is the rock picker.
Whoa. Don't say that out loud.
He literally just put that in there for a reason, to be fair.
Yeah, we're in recruitment mode right now for rock picking season.
I did a lot of rock picking on our farm in Southie.
Yeah, Southie was almost close enough to Regina. You might be able to make a pile now and make a deal with Home Depot. Mooseman's a long ways.
There you go. Hey, value add.
Heaves, I want to pull him back into the CEO role just for a second, because I spent yesterday 8 hours in front of a group in Ontario here talking about the farm CEO, the primary producer CEO. So, coming from a Monsanto and a Nutrien and taking over UPL, like what's the leadership? What's the culture shift? What were your initiatives coming into UPL to be a global leader, to be fair?
Yeah. Well, as you guys know, every company has a different strategy, and depending on the moment you're in it, that strategies can change. But they also have a different culture, And so I think our opportunity when I came to UPL was to really think through how do we grow this business exponentially. It's a unique company where the founding family still owns a third of the business, and so the rest of it trades on the Indian Stock Exchange for the most part. And so we still have the founders involved in the company. The chairman of the board is the second generation of the founding family, and has I would say a founder's mentality, which is, how can we do things twice as fast with half the cost? And so, so our opportunity here is how do we, and now that the market's changed, I would say kind of post-COVID, where, structurally, the global crop protection market is oversupplied from a capacity standpoint. The Chinese built a lot of capacity during the COVID lockdown window. And so how do we become super efficient? How do we grow? And, ultimately it's all about product quality, innovation, and being best at serving customers. So it's kind of the fundamental building blocks. But how do we take our culture, our opportunities, and drive value for our customers? So that's what we focus on every day.
I saw Evan snickering at the twice as fast and half the cost. It's like I scream things like that all the time.
I've heard it before.
Yeah. How do we be 10 times bigger and spend half amount as much money, Evan?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. The interesting part, I'm not sure I knew that you guys controlled 70% of your manufacturing channel.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a big deal. Like, one of the things, and whether you're a farmer or manufacturer, like, I think in this new world of risk management, how do you multi-source? And so as a manufacturer, even with our basic ingredients that we have to procure, we multi-source everything, because if we rely on one supplier, and multi-source not just from a company standpoint, but also from a country standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the other thing that, farmers and supply chains are thinking about more and more. How do we multi-source? Because if you're just relying on one supplier or one country of origin, and as we've all experienced in the last 4 or 5 years, that can create a lot of disruption. And so that we do think one of our value propositions, if companies want to be China plus one from a manufacturing standpoint, in our industry, we are the plus one.
Yeah. Well, I just think of pretty much every farmer in Western Canada, would know about the plant in Regina that was Bayer that went to BSF in the deal. And it was one of the parts that probably hurt Bayer's feelings, or it was a prized asset to have to lose in the Competition Bureau case. Right. And so then to hear that you guys have 70% of your own manufacturing side, like you said, I just bring it back to the farm, is that it's no different. If you think about it, for us as farmers in Canada, we have our own equipment to do the seeding. We try to get as much of the infrastructure for holding the grain and holding the fertilizer, right? And that is our manufacturing plant. And those farms that rely 100% on custom, which if we're in Argentina is different, but in Canada it's not, or 100% on grain bags, or 100% on their inputs to be delivered on time in the middle of seeding, like it makes business a lot tougher. There's you'd think maybe that's what we have, Evan, that we don't have all that stuff, because for you and I both to be bald, we shouldn't have that many problems. But it can add a lot of problems.
I'm bald because I work for you. Let's be fair.
Oh, yeah.
No, I agree, Kristjan. Like, if you have one equipment supplier, one, retailer that you're dealing with, yeah, I mean, obviously you want to have a partnership with those suppliers, but having just one of them, I think, increases the risk.
We literally, how long is it? I don't know. Did I ever not have a minimum of 2 rule, Ev? Like, I don't care if it's your bank, your retail, where you buy your truck. And what we found specifically as we grew, their supply chain, it usually wasn't them that caused the problem. It was their supply chain. But that, we might decide to pivot from one active to a next. And if they hadn't have done that plan in October and I want 10,000 acres of it, they couldn't supply it even, let alone at a price I wanted to pay. So, and I think even with equipment and chemical, we do bid sheets, and you're right. I'm not saying our suppliers always enjoy it, but what it's happened is because they know we're going to do that. I also think the amount of time it saves on negotiation, because guess what? As soon as people know that 2 or 3 places are bidding, they give you their best price. Right? It's just, you don't have to have the negotiation all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, Hebes, we're bumping up close to the hour, and I've got a plane to catch, so I need you to nail him with your last questions for me.
Oh yeah, so I call this the selfish part of the podcast, Mike, because I'm a curious person, and so I always like to take pieces of advice from everybody else. So question number 1 is, in your career, what are 1 or 2 pieces of advice from mentors or coworkers that have just stuck with you that you still use as kind of your guiding principles?
Yeah. Well, so firstly, being curious, I think, is a hugely important, both leadership and business ownership traits. So good that you take that approach. Look, I think if I go all the way back to my very first district sales manager, Greg Hockaday, who's a saint of a guy, when I was a young sales rep, we were calling. I remember the first visit he made with me, we called on Triway Fertilizer in Abernathy, Saskatchewan. Ron Bonish was running the business there. And, so made a call, and he kind of looked over my shoulder and kind of watched what I did and how I did it. And so we left the Triway, and about 5 minutes later, he said, just pull over. I was like, what the heck? Why do you want me to pull over? But I pulled over. And he said, after I stopped, he said, so let's just talk about the sales call. He said, what could have you done better? And it's just that mindset about always saying, like, what can I have done better on a reflection standpoint? Like, not taking a deep dive, but just always having that approach of what can you do better. Greg taught me that, and I think it served me super well in my career. The other thing I would say is my dad, like on our farm, he always had this mindset, and he talked about it. He said, you got to work hard. You got to work harder than anybody else. You got to work smarter. But you also have to take risk. If you don't take risk, you're going to stand still and you won't get ahead. And, he thought about that from a farming context, but that's also has served me well, I think, from a business career standpoint.
I agree with that one a lot, right? I think a lot of people in agriculture just say, well, we work harder than everybody else. No, working hard is just permission to play as being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I don't care if you run a car dealership or the local plumbing business. Every entrepreneur works hard. So how do you work smarter? How do you capture your opportunities? How do you maximize risk, as in how do you optimize it? Take that risk and invest in innovation to turn it into profit, right? That one,
100%.
That one's really good.
And we said the biggest risk to entrepreneurs is complacency. So, I mean, the part about risk, 100%, is I've had lots of guys who sat on the sidelines for 10 years and they got great looking balance sheets, but they also missed out on the top 10 years in real estate growth that they could have taken that risk, right? Like it's those discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question number 2, favorite book that you've read lately?
Wow. Lately.
But it doesn't have to be lately, ever. Just favorite book.
So typically I like nonfiction adventure, and I like nonfiction adventure just to see how people thrive and survive like really challenging situations. So like a book like Shackleton. So Endurance, maybe the book's called Endurance, but Shackleton was the captain, and this was back in the early 1900s, and they were taking their ship through the Antarctic, and it got hung up. I think there was like 30 people, 27 or 30. Long story short, they were shipwrecked for like 3 or 4 years, no one died. And ultimately, he kind of led the rescue mission. But it's a story of survival, which is always interesting.
Yeah.
But likewise, it's also a story about leadership and like how he kept the morale high. And so that's a really cool book, I think, on that's both interesting and a good leadership book.
But the books, I love reading and listening to books, and it's one of I send books out to friends at Christmas, but some of the answers, like I've never heard of this book. I'll put it on my list. I'll read it in the next month or two. But I remember John Heimbecker. He's like, I'll give you a business book. And then I'm not going to lie to you. When I was in like one of the worst elevators we own in middle of nowhere, Nova Scotia, I read Harry Potter, I think it was, because he's like, I was just trying to keep my mind moving.
Well, to be fair, Mo said Bob Probert. So we'll take.
There you go. Yeah. I'd much rather read, something that has a leadership lesson than just somebody tell me about leadership.
Yep. No, exactly. Yeah. And then my last question is, if you had a magic wand, and I'm going to get you to focus on Canadian agriculture, this one, if you had a magic wand and you could do something right now that you think kind of allows Canadian agriculture to like really turn into the powerhouse that it should be, what would you do?
Well, look, I think right now, like at the moment, trade policy is critical. And as we all know, farmers often get caught in the crosshairs of these geopolitical trade wars, which we're in one right now. I mean, really happy to see here recently that, the deal on canola got done with China. So that's fantastic. But, ultimately, I just think, trade policy, which I know the PM seems to be very focused on that. And I've got some optimism that there's going to be a path there. So that would be one, I guess. But the other one just would be just overall ag policy. And I know you guys spend a lot of time thinking about ag policy. And so advocating for smart ag policy that helps farmer resilience, I think is critical. I'm a big believer that like the most successful farmers and the ones that make the best decisions, they're the ones that need to be rewarded. But so how do you create policy where that's the outcome?
We just podcasted the premier last week, and your comment on the new PM having a focus on trade policy, he more or less said live that we now have a prime minister that cares about trade policy. We don't agree on everything, but he cares about trade policy. And we used to have a prime minister that wanted to do yoga on the Great Wall of China. He actually said that. Oh, did I laugh?
It's awesome.
I won't make any comment on that.
Yeah. It was, and you know what, I would agree with you. I just spent 2 or 3 days in Ottawa and met with a bunch of bureaucrats and quite a few of the ministers and a lot of money interested in agriculture. And, there's a cautious optimism on ag policy, on trade agreements, that there's a lot of the right things being said compared to the last 11 years. But now we just want to see more action and things get done and things get opened up and opportunities captured. Right. And so but it's also a real blessing to be cautiously optimistic versus consistently frustrated.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Canada has a unique opportunity right now based on what's going on in the world to create more and more of these, bilateral or multilateral trade deals. And so that will really help Canadian farmers.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well,
cool.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the conversation. Don't get me wrong. The first half, he was over my head, so I'm just going to let you take it. Thank you. Thank you for going the agronomy route, which I know nothing about.
Hey, it is not that hard to be over your head. You're pretty short.
Ouch. But again, thank you, Mike, for joining in. And those listening, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and leave us comments. And that's the Truth About Ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.